We're more than likely going to be receiving news of which legendary Pokemon will appear in Pokemon Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire with the upcoming June issue of Japan's CoroCoro magazine, confirmed by Cerebi.net, and I have numerous theories on just what legendary Pokemon we will see in the games due for release in November of this year. It's safe to presume that the legendary Pokemon native to Hoenn will once again be in these games. These Pokemon are Registeel, Regirock, Regice, Latias, Latias, Groudon, Kyogre and Rayquaza. With this being said, I'm not going to speculate on their reappearance, as it's pretty much a dead cert that these will be in the games. I'm instead going to talk about other legendary Pokemon that could be appearing in these games, and my reasoning as for why. Remakes of previous Pokemon games have always seen the introduction of numerous new legendary Pokemon that we didn't see in the original games. In Pokemon Fire Red and Leaf Green, we saw the inclusion of Raikou, Entei and Suicune, as well as Lugia and Ho-Oh through the event that unlocks Naval Rock. And in Pokemon Heart Gold and Soul Silver, we saw the inclusion of Latias, Latias, Kyogre, Groudon and Rayquaza. Patterns we saw in previous Pokemon games isn't going to be my only form of evidence, however, as that would be rather short-sighted. The area that featured in Pokemon Fire Red and Leaf Green, Naval Rock, also made an appearance in Pokemon Emerald, making both Ho-Oh and Lugia obtainable in the games through an official event. Game Freak always likes to add in new explorable areas in the remakes, for example, the Sevi Islands in Fire Red and Leaf Green, and the additional Safari Zone in Heart Gold and Soul Silver. And while Naval Rock isn't anything new to Pokemon Ruby, Sapphire and Emerald, as we've saw it before, it's my theory that Naval Rock will be fully explorable once you've completed the games. Maybe only one of the Pokemon will be obtainable exclusively in each version, but I fully expect Ho-Oh and Lugia to be obtainable, along with perhaps Ursine to appear, chasing the legendary beasts in Hoenn, much like with Steven Stone's inclusion in Heart Gold and Soul Silver. While this is purely speculation, past patterns and more examples of evidence to follow appear to make this a bigger possibility. Game Freak have put a huge emphasis on only allowing Pokemon bred or captured in Generation 6 to be allowed in official tournaments. And while most legendary Pokemon are banned in competitive play, they still make it so every legendary Pokemon would be randomly generated with at least 3 perfect IVs, making it a lot easier to obtain competitively viable legendary Pokemon if you so choose. Lugia, Ho-Oh and the 3 legendary beasts of Johto are currently unavailable in Generation 6 to be caught natively and therefore would not be allowed to be used in official tournaments. However, seeing them in the Hoenn remakes Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire would mean there is a legal way to obtain competitively viable versions of these Pokemon native to Generation 6. However, the Johto legendary Pokemon aren't the only legendary Pokemon I think that will make an appearance. The Sinnoh legendary trio, Dialga, Palkia and Giratina, would be the only legendary Pokemon alongside the Johto legendary Pokemon unavailable to be sent through the Pokemon Transporter in Pokemon Bank directly when Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire are released, if those legendary Pokemon don't make an appearance, as you have to transport them from Generation 4 to Generation 5 initially. This makes the process of obtaining them in Generation 6 just a little bit more difficult. However, if the Sinnoh legendary trio as well as the Johto legendary Pokemon were obtainable in Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, no legendary Pokemon would have to be sent from the Generation 4 games upwards to Generation 5, making every single legendary Pokemon compatible with Pokemon Bank and its Pokemon Transporter. I'm sure Game Freak feel the need to make every Pokemon directly obtainable with Pokemon Bank, and streamlining every game would make that service perfect. Pokemon like Uxie, Mesprit and Atself as well as Cresselia and Heatran are already in Pokemon Black 2 and White 2 and therefore directly compatible with Pokemon Bank, so that's why they won't make an appearance in Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. A final note, every Pokemon remaker saw the legendary Pokemon from the next generation obtainable, and Heart Gold and Soul Silver also featured legendary Pokemon from the previous generation. And while I'm sure this is just a meaningless pattern, it does still provide some insight of what Game Freak may be trying to do. Maybe Pokemon from the previous games, Gold, Silver and Crystal, and games that were released after Diamond, Pearl and Platinum will make an appearance, just like we saw in Heart Gold and Soul Silver with Articuno, Zapdos, Moltres, Mewtwo and the Hoenn legendaries already discussed. I hope I've maybe convinced you that we'll be seeing more legendary Pokemon in Pokemon Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, and maybe made you more excited at the possibility. I hope this theory has made sense and I haven't confused you with some of my wording. I can sometimes be a little long-winded. As always, 250 likes would be super appreciated on this video, and feel free to subscribe so you don't miss any of my future speculation and news videos, and leave a comment to tell me what legendary Pokemon you're most excited to see in these games. As always, my name is P1all. Thank you so much for watching, and peace out!